Hi and welcome to the OCR Review, a podcast that covers all things OCR from all around the world.
The first truly international OCR podcast. We are from the UK, living in Asia and following the US racing scene to bring you a holistic overview of what's going on in OCR globally. Hi guys, welcome back to the OCR Review. Really excited to have Ian Deeth with us today. We've been talking a lot this week about what's in our race kit, what we normally take to races, and also the things which we're trialling at the moment, seeing as we've got a bit of an extended off season that we might want to factor into our race weekend preparation moving forwards. So thank you so much, Ian, for joining us today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Good. We're glad to have you on here. So one of the reasons why we decided to talk to you today specifically about race kit, which I was mentioning to you a little bit just before we got on the call, was that one of the things you said to me a while back that really stuck with me is that when you're planning for race weekends, you take multiple pairs of shoes so that you can be prepared for every terrain and every different type of weather. So I thought we'd start there and kind of talk about your race preparation, and are shoes the most important thing for you when it comes down to what you can fit into a travel bag?
Yeah, so usually with a lot of my races, I take like hand carry on rather than check-in luggage, simply because a lot of the races I'm leaving after school from my job as a teacher on a Friday, and I want to get to the race venue as quickly as possible so I can get a decent night's sleep as early as I can. So always as much as I can fit into a carry-on bag. And yeah, the trainers are definitely the essential item, or footwear, should I say, is the essential item for me. So if I know the venue, I'll probably take like the pair that I'm wearing on, which may be a race option as well, and then maybe 2 extra pairs. But if it's a venue I'm unfamiliar with, then including the trainers that I'm wearing, I'd have maybe four options.
Four
if
options.
I didn't know much, up to that.
Oh my
so
goodness.
let's say, for example, I went to Chengdu, the China Sprint, and I did as much research as I could leading up to the race in terms of what the terrain was like. But I could see it was slightly undulating. I could see there was a bit of road. There was some grass. There looked like there was possibly some muddy terrain, but it was really tricky to get any information on that race because a lot of the China stuff isn't published. You just kind of work out where the area is. It's all done through a different medium to Facebook and
they have a different
Instagram
platform for their race information as well, and most of it comes through in Chinese.
So I kind of knew where the area was. Google Maps worked it out, but I had some Nike streaks, Nike Zoom streaks, which I wore over there, which were kind of my walk around footwear, but potential race. Then I took a couple of pairs of VJs, which were my preferred shoe, which I thought for that venue. And I always take, if I think I've got if I've got 2 pairs of one particular shoe, just in case something happens, like they get busted or something in the warm up, or I don't know. It's just an option, and that has happened to me before. I've broken a pair of shoes in a warm up.
I was going to say that sounds like something that's happened through experience rather than you just thinking that was a good idea. Yeah,
no, it happened in the Philippines prior to that. So I had the old Reebok All-Terrains, and as I was tying them up, the one of the holes which you poke the laces through just completely popped, and I couldn't get a secure fit on it. But luckily, I had a spare pair. I was still I was ready for that moment. So yeah, that was helpful. Certainly, it's been a lifesaver in a couple of situations. And then I took some Innovates as well. I think it was the 210s. So yeah, in that race actually, I had a little chance to check out the terrain before the race, and the streaks were actually the race I went for, and there was the likelihood of rain for that race was very low. And I checked my bag in, but I'd taken like a couple of pairs with me. And I'd left one pair at the hotel. I'd left the Innovates at the hotel, and it started to rain quite heavily 20 minutes prior to the start of the race.
Oh gosh.
So I was like, okay, let's make a switch. So I switched to the VJs actually 20 minutes before the race, and it was a good call. I ran a really good race. I wasn't able to see obviously the whole course before the race, and there was a couple of sections where it was quite wet on rock, and I don't think the streaks would have been the correct choice. And I feel like definitely I ran a race close to my potential based on choosing the correct footwear there. So yeah, certainly when I'm packing, the trainers is probably the first thing I'm thinking about. I think the rest of my race kit, I've got a spreadsheet which I go through. I think I just want to make sure that I don't forget any items. So I do.
With you on that, we love a good list.
Yeah, I go back to my spreadsheet, and then, most of it's kind of there, and I check through it. But, there's the odd item now and again, even like post race, just making sure that I get my, nutrition in straight away afterwards, leading into the race, obviously making sure that I get the right nutrition leading in. And particularly with China, again, I knew that getting hold of the right food prior to my race was probably going to be a little bit trickier. And that was absolutely spot on. So I had all my meals and all my prep ready to go for that particular race as well.
I'm completely with you on that. Actually, nutrition for me is the one thing that I will always make sure that I have, like, to the point where I've had conversations with people going through security at the airport, arguing about whether or not tinned tuna counts as liquid or not. So we're going for longer weekends, and I'm like, because I want to have and I'll have a little tin of tuna, I'll have a little bag of pasta, because worst case, you can always boil a kettle somewhere.
Absolutely,
to cook up so that I know exactly what it is that I'm getting.
Absolutely, and you've got to be a little bit careful as well. I know some countries don't allow you to bring particular types of fruit in. Yeah. Like even bananas in Taiwan, I know they can take those away, and you could get fined potentially for that as well. But yeah, as long as you kind of we put so much time and effort into our training, and some of these races now are just getting so close that you just want to make sure that obviously we put everything into our training, but the preparation and the build up into the race and the race kit being part of that is so critical in terms of making sure that you perform to the best of your ability. That I constantly go over and I speak to other people as well about what they're packing, what else they're using, and trainers is the essential in terms of the actual kit itself, but got lots of little other things that I take which I feel are quite important to me performing well as well.
So what I'm wondering actually with the trainers is that obviously I kind of know you in the context of Ian Deeth, pro Spartan racer. You've been obviously racing obstacle course races for a very long time and at a high level, a lot longer than I have. But do you find that having a selection of trainers is something that is specific to your OCR preparation, or were you also as particular about having multiple shoe options in your previous life? Because obviously you've done a lot of athletics and a lot of different sports before Spartan. So can you share a little bit of that with us?
Yep, sure. So I've kind of, obviously I played football up until about 18, 19. And then I transferred over when I was at university to track and field. I say track and field, track, specifically sprinting. So I started with 60 meters, and actually for that's the first race I ever did. And we're talking 1998. So we're talking a long time ago, obviously 22 years ago now. Someone lent me a pair of shoes for that first race, which was a 60-meter indoor event at Crystal Palace. And they were like a middle distance spike. It was a guy called Mike Skinner, who's actually advises me a little bit with my distance running, but he was, a superb runner himself, but a middle distance runner, and went on to represent sort of Great Britain in sort of like world and European cross countries and stuff like that. So I had this middle distance pair of spikes for a sprint race. And so, they did the job. I ran okay that particular evening, but started doing my kind of research into footwear straight away in terms of the sprinting. And there were some beautiful shoes back then. And obviously I was introduced to this world of spikes, and then I knew I needed a different pair for sort of like other parts of my workouts. And then I was very lucky, really, actually. I did a little bit of kind of sports modeling on the side, and a particular job came up where I got called at a very, very late notice. They needed someone who was a US size 10, UK size 9 for a particular job in, it was in France, Monaco.
Oh, wow.
Basically the model kind of that was meant to be doing the shoot was not, I think they were like a size 12 or 13. So
oh gosh.
I got the call, flew out to kind of Monaco. Literally, I got the call Friday midday, flew out Friday evening, went off to a hotel in Monaco with Paula Radcliffe, was the other athlete there.
Oh my God.
and went through like an array of different Nike. Well, the main prototype of the shoe was like one of the Pegasus actually at the time.
Oh, okay.
But we went through an array of different shoes there, and I was like, okay, there's some nice ones here, and then I just started like, it was probably my kind of a passion for trainers kind of started then, and way back then, certainly I was not just looking at performance trainers, I was looking at style trainers, whatever else.
Yeah.
And then certainly now, as I've moved over into kind of OCR and everything else, I'm not so bothered about like what it looks like. It's like what the function and the job. So yeah, it's something that trainers have always been something that I've loved, a passion, and certainly we are kind of in the generation of the year of carbon fiber plates, and we've never seen so many options and so many incredible different types of footwear. So yeah, I still buy a lot of trainers, and whether I'm using them for OCR, track, longer runs, gym workouts.
What are your go-to pair at the moment? Because I know that myself, I'm using this kind of extended off season to try some different pairs of shoes. Are you doing the same, or have you kind of got a pair that is just like, this is the one I want to run in?
I'm always open to trying lots of different pairs, and when I go down the track with my group, there are a lot of guys who are the same size shoe as me. So we usually spend time warming up or warming down, switching shoes, which maybe isn't hygienically one of the best things to be doing.
Especially not in the social distancing era, but...
yeah, certainly that's not happening at the moment, obviously. But,
pre-circuit breaker.
Yeah, it's a good... Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's a good opportunity to try lots of different shoes. But specifically for OCR, I really do switch them up depending on the venue. I think it's like, if I feel I can get away with trainers, I'll wear trainers, and not the Nike Zoom Streaks, the 7s, which have come out about 6 months ago. Love that shoe. It's just the Streak has always been a Nike shoe, which I feel is just a great racing shoe for anything sort of maybe up to 10K, better for 5. So that would be my go-to on a flat terrain. If it's muddy, but grassy, muddy, and not so kind of like raining or rocky, I'd probably go with a Hoka Evo Jaws. And then if it's kind of wet and rocky and quite unpredictable terrain, I'd probably go with the VJ XTRMs. But they're kind of the three that would be the main ones I'd choose. But certainly there's other ones, like if I went back to Windsor in the UK, I'd probably go with my Innovates 210s for that race. And if it was a really, flat, fast, concrete race, I may even slip on the Vaporflies if I wanted to. So yeah, I'd try to do as much research into the venue and then choose appropriately from there.
Sounds like you have lots of options. So I mean, my next question was going to be whether you travel light or you make sure that you have lots of backup plans, but I think we kind of answered that one.
Yeah, I'll cram as much into that bag as possible. So yeah, there's backup plans. Even if I lose something, I feel I have a couple of other options. But yeah.
Okay, yeah, there's spares for everything. In that case, if you had one item, we'll take shoes out of it, that you had to recommend for someone who was going to their first Spartan race, what would be the one thing you said to them, you have to make sure you have this in your bag and you have this with you?
Okay, that's a tricky one. Obviously the shoes would be the premium one that I would be thinking about.
Or top 3 other essential items.
Top 3. So in terms of, if I maybe go for travel, obviously your shoes would be the key one. Just make sure you're taking something before your race that you're comfortable with in terms of eating, so that you've trialed in training. So some type of pre-race food, nutrition that you would feel would allow you to perform to the best of your ability and sit well in your stomach. So a type of nutrition. I guess the clothing would be the other key one as well, whether that's a particular type of socks that work well with the trainers, or leggings, or a top that you feel would be comfortable for you to race in and allow you to achieve your best performance. I think the clothing aspect is pretty key. And again, I've trialed so many different things, and some of the craft gear is great. They had the 2-in-1 shorts. I quite like those. And for the socks, I always go with the Injin G's, the toe socks. I just find them comfortable. They drain well. Had no issues at all with blisters with the mix and match of the footwear that I use. So yeah, and again, trying all these things before you race as well if you're new to the scene. Don't just bowl up
100%.
day one. Yeah, and when I say training in it, like I live on East Coast Park. Part of it, if you're doing say a 6k, 8k, 10k run in the water for a bit, run on the kind of mixed terrain through the middle of the paths. You know, roll around on it, find something to jump over, find something to pull on, hang on. You know, just make sure you've not just done a little gentle road run in them. You know, go on the terrain, try and get yourself dirty, using that particular footwear, that clothing, and see if it holds up, and you'd be comfortable to push yourself in it.
No, 100%. And actually, that's one of the things I'm finding quite interesting and difficult to an extent at the moment, is that I'm also trying out some new gear, so craft gear as well, to see what some of those items would be like to race in, and would normally be the same as you. I'm like, right, how many different types of terrains can I get this onto? Have I practiced rolling around, hanging off of things? Do I think it's going to get snagged anywhere? That sort of thing. Obviously,
that's it.
Not quite so possible at the moment. And one of the things that actually I really liked is that quite early in this kind of strange COVID period, before we had really gone into a full lockdown here, I noticed that you came out on social media quite early and quite openly and said, you know, I'm now pledging to run solo and to train solo at this point in time. So I was wondering, seeing as you kind of proactively went ahead and did that before a lot of these social distancing measures were put in place, and knowing that you're quite a planner, you always have a spreadsheet on the go. How have you, I guess, embraced the changing situations in your training, and when it comes to testing out your gear, going out for your runs? I know that down by East Coast Park, the beach areas and the bits of water, because it obviously goes out onto the ocean, you're not able to use at the moment. How are you kind of working around the situation in your training?
It's, you know, I think first of all, you know, we're blessed that actually we can still go outside.
Yes,
so even
100%.
though, you know, we're training locally at East Coast, you know, East Coast Park is on my doorstep. Yeah. So I'm pretty lucky. It's completely flat. So the elevation I'm getting is in, obviously I live on the 24th floor of my condominium. So the elevation is coming from stairs. I can't get it through running outside along East Coast Park. But yeah, obviously I love training with my group, not just because of the facilitation of people pushing you in the sessions and giving you that extra push and help during particularly sort of your interval and your threshold work, but just the social aspect as well, and bouncing ideas off each other and swapping trainers and so forth. But yeah, so basically it's so tricky to know when we're going to race next, right? So the plan obviously for me this year was to go out to the US in the summer. And you know, the key races for me were 3 races I'd planned out in the States, 2 Spartan Stadions and a 5K around the Boulder area. And that was for me was where I was looking to peak. It was a 4-week period, which I feel was kind of like you can peak for about that amount of time before you need to maybe go back into some other training. And obviously you know, the flight tickets are still booked, but the likelihood of going out to the US, I feel at this stage is, you know, very, very, very small.
Unfortunately,
So I've kind of gone back to more of a like foundation stage and just building up the aerobic base. Obviously I've raced a lot over the last couple of years and not maybe given myself the amount of time I should have to create a really solid foundation. And so the circuit breaker and COVID-19 situation has allowed me to focus on gaining that aerobic base. So I'm still keeping a little bit of threshold in there, tiny bit of speed, not as much as I normally would, but just lacing down that foundation and running a lot more in between the trees and the kind of more difficult paths along East Coast Park. So rather than, I'm not really running on the main paths, I'm running between the trees, across the kind of tree roots. Anything that looks slightly dodgy, I'm going that way. And I'm feeling that's kind of keeping me, it's helping with social distancing, but kind of just keeping me like a little bit like challenged. And then, with the kind of interval and threshold work, which I'm doing less of, just having to dig through those sessions by myself. And a couple of them have gone incredibly well. And then there's been other times where it's been really, really tough.
Yeah.
And I just, particularly like you go off and you do your first rep and you're like, oh shit, I am miles away from the time I should be clocking. And,
Yeah.
if you had someone to latch onto or someone really giving you a firm word in your ear, and you kind of almost got to play like the imaginary game that someone's there next to you, digging you, pushing you. And yeah, and I guess the positive is as well, like with those sessions now, I'm still working, but I'm working remotely, but it's given me a little bit more of a chance to rest after these sessions. So I can, with those particular sessions go, full throttle, and then knowing that I've got the time to recover afterwards. So yeah, it's just strange times, but I guess the quick answer is going back to roots, foundation, and building a good aerobic base at this stage with my training rather than focusing on anything to do with races.
Yeah, fair enough. I think it's interesting as well. I mean, you've always had a very good mental game. That's something that I always admire about you, even, before this whole kind of period of craziness kicked off, is that you always approach your training in a very level manner and, really do kind of embody, I guess, the spirit of running your own race and racing so that you can be proud of your performance, which I think is wonderful. So it's been great to kind of follow your journey over the last few weeks and see how you've been also kind of applying that mentality to the circuit breaker period as well. I mean, one of the things I was wondering is we've, I guess, embraced some of the Zoom trend for the at-home workout sort of thing, because I know that I've also kind of, like you, the social aspect of exercising and being able to bounce ideas off of other people and, to kind of share their energy and enthusiasm for a session is really, really important. So we've kind of gone out and bought a bunch of random kit for the flat that we're now kind of swinging around in our living room. So is that something that you've also done and embraced, or are you just trying to kind of get out there and really focus on your running volume for now?
I think I've tried as much as possible just to keep to as much of the training that I would normally do as possible. I have certainly mixed up a few things. I was quite lucky actually from my school. We were able to bring a bit of equipment back with us. So I've managed to take back like a bar and about 120 kilograms of weight that I can stack on that.
Amazing.
So that was great. And a couple of kettlebells, a rower, and I've got my own stuff here as well. So I think it's amazing what I'm seeing online. It's some of the stories we're seeing, like that guy from the UK, that was he 99 years old and he did 100 laps of his garden or some area or something.
Crazy,
him finishing it off. It looks really posh and quite beautiful where he was. I was like, is this his house?
I know. I was like, I really wish I had a garden, like not even just a garden like that, just a garden.
It looked incredible where he was, but and all of these people who are managing to adapt and find different ways to train and possibly finding something new that works for them in the process. A lot of my sprint training, and when I wasn't really doing OCR stuff, I did quite a lot of gym work and similar workouts to what I'm seeing a lot of people do now in their homes. And it for me now, the aspect I need to work on is the running, and particularly the longer it gets, the less I would say it is a strength for me. If Spartan race, was always just sprints, which is definitely the distance I prefer, it would be a lot stronger for me. But I'm, definitely now with the 10K Super, I feel that is an event that I could also do fairly well at as well. So I just need to focus on the running. I know that's my weakness, and in terms of the vertical game would be something I'd really want to try and improve as well. And as I say, I'm getting that in my condo, but I'm probably not doing as much of the circuit workouts and Zoom workouts as the majority of other people. Although I think I might be doing something online with Joe DeSena next week. So
watch this space.
Yeah,
you had it here first, guys.
Possibly. Yeah. So I might do a one-off.
Oh, okay. Special appearance. Well, we'll have to look out for that. And let us know when you're doing it so we can follow along as well.
I will do that, definitely.
For sure. Well, that's good to know. And it's interesting as well to hear about how you're shifting up your training and focusing more on building the aerobic base at the moment. I think that's also something that as I came to the slow realization that races probably weren't going to happen, or at least anytime soon, and even if they did, we might not be able to travel and get to them. I'm also trying to use this as a little bit more of a foundational period and just focus on a lot more easy volume and I guess mobility and getting some of that foundational strength back, which is something that I found really important. But actually, one of the things that you mentioned was how your training has changed between when you were running through to OCR. And just before all of this kicked off, I know you were doing some work with Sports Singapore as well that was looking at some different training modalities. So I know that obviously that's something that's not ongoing at the moment, but could you share a little bit about the sort of training that you were looking at with that?
Yeah, sure. So a gentleman called Danny Lum, who's the head of strength and conditioning for Singapore Sport, he basically puts out a kind of, not an advertisement, but a kind of shout out looking for athletes of a certain speed. I can't remember what the kind of like,
criteria.
Criteria. Yeah, I think it was like maybe sub 22 minutes or something for 5K. And he said he was looking at different strength training methods and how that had an impact on performance for endurance athletes. So I signed up. My strength and conditioning, I've very much gone back to, initially when I was doing OCR, I went back to a lot of the Olympic lifting and compound movement lifting I was doing when I was sprinting. And it's always been something I've constantly changed my mind about in terms of the best method of what is best for OCR. You've obviously got your strength and conditioning for the running aspect, but then you've got the strength and conditioning for the obstacle carrying element as well.
Yes.
And trying to work out what should be part of that strength and conditioning program is, I found it really, really tricky, and I've tried to tap into as many different people and find out as much information as I can. So this came up and I was like, okay, let's give this a go. Let's see what happens. So
fair enough.
We did like a VO2 max, a couple of an isometric pull, which was basically pulling a bar on with your feet on a force plate, a vertical jump, and a 2.4K time trial.
Okay.
That was week 1, and then we had, I think it was 8 weeks of strength and conditioning, a certain program. So we were either placed into one of 3 groups, which was an isometric group, a traditional strength circuit group, or for myself, it was the plyometric group, which was really actually the type of training that I wanted to. That was the group I wanted to be in. I didn't have a choice, and luckily I was put into that group. And then we got tested on the VO2, the strength, the both strength elements, the isometric pull, the vertical jump, and the 2.4K time trial at the end. And as the strength, Danny was fantastic and his team were amazing in terms of really watching me and helping me in terms of making sure that, my foot contact on the ground was minimal. Technically, everything was either going, if it was plyometrics for distance, I was pushing off in the right direction, or if it was vertical jumps, I was landing with the full foot on the ground, but with minimal contact time. So the coaching tips and techniques that they were talking to me about during the time was awesome. And the program was progressive as well. So it wasn't like they just threw me into it. It was staggered and increased in difficulty with a rest week kind of in the middle of the program.
What was the
easier week in the middle
what was
of the
the
program.
time duration for the program? How long did it run for?
I think it was 9 weeks in total. I think it was like a test week. It was somewhere 6 or 8 weeks in the middle, and then the final test. So the pre-test, the training for 6 to 8 weeks, about that, and then the post-test. And during that time, I ran like a 5K PD, but regardless of had I ran like a personal best in the 5K or the test data, I knew I felt a lot more powerful and had that kind of what I would call ping in my step better than I had previously. And the training molded well with the other type of training I was doing. So since I finished the testing and all the test results went up hugely, I think 25 seconds I knocked off the 2.4K time trial My
Wow.
VO2, I managed to go from, I think it was like 64 and a bit initially to 69 or something like that. So it was
Oh
a
my
massive
gosh.
increase.
Yeah.
Yeah. And VO2 is a strange one because I don't think it's so important to look into it, and it's more of a grit, a mental test as well. I feel the VO2
Yeah,
max.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah, it's kind of like, but it
it's
was
kind of one that you
and
can do and go like, yeah, okay, great, that's where I'm at. There's not much more you can take from it.
Exactly. I think we're similar that we look at other tests such as like threshold as more important indicators of where, how we should base our training. But yeah, and then the other two strength tests improved. I think one actually stayed the same, but the other one improved. And yeah, and I was like, okay, I'm going to incorporate this now into my training. And I'm touching base with Danny now and again and just saying, look, how can I progress this? When should I come off this? But with kind of a strength, a background in sports science and quite a lot of knowledge previous to strength and conditioning, but still trying to find my way in OCR. This was something that was interesting. And I feel almost now I'm in the best place I've been in terms of the strength and conditioning training that I'm doing, although still digging out there for as much information as I can. And I'm sure if we had a conversation 6 months down the line, something else would have dramatically changed as well with the strength and conditioning and how I look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think OCR is still such a tricky sport to train for, especially from the strength aspect, because getting the balance of how often you're running versus how often you're strength training, at what point does it become detrimental rather than beneficial? And then, like you said, the type of strength training that you're doing as well. I think I've gone similar battle to you in that I also do a lot of the Olympic lifts, but find that I have to really change up when I'm doing those and how in my training. So I focused a lot more on them during the off season to just build general strength, and then when it gets into the race season, I actually move away from that sort of work and do a little bit more endurance based work, but also try to do I guess more kind of kettlebell work or more dynamic work. I incorporate more plyometrics and that sort of thing, because I feel like you said, you need a bit more of that ping once you get into the race season. Actually, what I think is quite interesting as well about the work you did with Sports Singapore is that one of the coaches that I work with at Coached Fitness, a guy called Ming, he was also on the same program, but he was put into the isometric group, and also found that he had a massive amount of improvement and has now incorporated a lot of those exercises into his running as well. Obviously coming at it from a very different perspective, because he is more of an endurance runner and does more of the distance runs, so slightly different needs to OCR, but the
isometric group, I think Danny, when he's doing his PhD, so this is part of his PhD study, I think the main aim of this study was looking at that isometric group, as he feels that is a great way moving forward. He feels there's been really good advancements in terms of the research proving that can really help. But I think the knock-on effect with isometric training is that the fatigue factor after you finish it is not as great. So when you are trying to incorporate into a full training program, say you've got a track session the next day or something else the next day, you're not going to be as fatigued, where your traditional strength circuit program or like an Olympic lifting or weights program or a plyometric program might take that little bit more out of you. So you would go into the next session fatigued and you're not recovering as much as you should. And obviously that can impact your other sessions. So it's interesting. Since the study, he's actually just sent out a couple of videos on isometric training that you can do at home during the circuit breaker without the need for equipment. So I watched the first video, which was really interesting. He sent a second one. I haven't watched it, but it's great. He's really passionate about it as well. And I think I got that vibe from him initially. And when you work with people who are so passionate about what they do, they're going to be putting their all into giving you the best program. And then there's a lot more of a trust factor and a lot more emphasis in terms of the fact that you can then put it into your training and knowing that it's coming from someone who's really researched and given their best to you for you to try it. So
100%. I think when you're working with anyone who has that level of energy and enthusiasm, you can't help but also kind of go into it wholeheartedly as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we'll wrap up shortly, but before we do, one of the things that we love to discuss on the podcast is what our favorite workout of the week has been, especially at the moment when that's been a bit limited. So I was wondering if you'd share with us what's been one of your top workouts this week.
Have you already shared on the podcast your workout of the week, Ilona? Or
I have indeed. I have. My favourite this week was a steady run session. That
nice.
In between I did 4 sets of 10 squats with then kind of 30-second steady hill repeats, and then moved on and kind of just kept it over some hilly terrain, which I was quite enjoying.
Cool.
A bit of a try to keep it mostly aerobic, because I'm trying to do a lot more of that kind of easier aerobic effort at the moment, but still incorporating some strength work as well. So
cool. Nice, very nice.
So sorry for people who are listening and hearing them over again. I should have come up with a new one and been like, oh, it's my stair session.
No. Yeah, so I've actually had prior to this morning, I had 6 days where I took it incredibly easy, actually.
Okay.
So this morning I did something which was a little bit, I would say, well, a little bit. It was really hard, actually. So I live on the 24th floor of my condo. So I did some OCR stair specific work. So basically the order was stairs, an exercise, and then a 200-meter run. So I went to the 6th floor, the 12th floor, the 18th floor, the 24th floor, and then 24th floor, 18th, 12th, and 6th. And so after each of the stairs up and then back down, after the 6th floor, I came down and I did 15 box jumps and then a 200-meter run. The 12th, I didn't actually do an exercise because I took a sandbag up to the 12th floor.
Nice.
And then back down again. 18th up and down, I did hang release press ups. 24th, I went up. I've got a rower, so I did a 500-meter row. Back down, and then as I got back down, 15 burpees. And then I repeated that sequence back.
Backwards.
So it was always, so 24, 18. So it was 120 floors. It worked out actually on my watch. I don't know how accurate it is. Exactly 1,000 feet of elevation.
Oh my gosh.
So, yeah, which was quite cool. It took me like 46 minutes and my heart rate was super high on it. And
that sounds like a hard effort.
Like 8, I'm not Susie Walsh in terms of stair running who can do those sessions up and down. So, 18, 24, 24, 18. Most of that was just walking and pulling as much as I could on the rail and pressing down on the other hand with my quads. It was painful. It was horrible. And I had to say, like, a couple of times, particularly around the 18, 24, I had to take some water on board as well. I had that kind of all stashed ready to go when I went back down to the bottom floor. So yeah, it was hard, but it was fun. And it was funny when I got to the kind of last 12 floors and then 6 floors, I found that kind of second surge.
Yes.
And it was like I finished, I was like, damn, there's definitely more in there for this, because it was the first time I'd kind of done this session. And so at least I have a marker now, and maybe a month down the line I'll try and push that again. So that was my workout of the week.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I like that that's one that you're now going to build back in potentially as well to time trial.
I think so. I think, as I say, it's do you know when you invent a new workout, you come up with a new workout and you timed it and you're like, oh man, I could have pushed it more in that section. So so we'll see. But hopefully, fingers crossed, in a month's time, it might be like, oh, we're back outside and I can get back to my crit sheet, back with my group. And I think I will repeat the workout anyway. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, that's been kind of one of the nice things about this is that it has kind of forced everyone to rethink the way that they're training, to come up with some new exercises. I don't know about you, but I've been using it to come up with some new recipes and try out new things in the kitchen as well. So it has actually been, I guess, a great way of forcing people to be creative as well.
Absolutely. I think with a Spartan race, the skill sets of running and grip strength are, skill sets that we need, but we also need skill sets of being flexible, adaptable, managing creatively in different situations. You have to think on your feet sometimes. And so, we've now come up with a new scenario in terms of the COVID-19 situation where we're going to have to be flexible, adaptable with what we do, but staying positive as well. And I think having the right mindset in Spartan race when you're actually racing and having a positive mindset now during times where it's a little bit trickier to do what we want to be doing is in changeable, transferable skill set. So just got to keep with it. I know as well you wanted to possibly talk about race penalties. Did you want to still touch on that? Because I do have some strong thoughts on this.
Oh, okay. Yes, I did.
Yeah.
I was going to kind of throw that in as a bonus question. So obviously we do a lot of Spartan racing here in particular. So we're very familiar with the burpee penalty. But we did do an episode a while back on what our ideal race penalties would be if it wasn't burpees. So please do share. Yeah.
So I think, you know, whenever you mention the word Spartan race, you know, if you're going to do like family fortune, you know, remember family
Spartan
fortune?
race, burpees, yes.
It's one of the first things that comes up, right? And it's a great exercise in terms of fitness and all body workout. You know, if you ask someone to do 30 burpees, or if someone is good at knocking out a lot of burpees, it's amazing in terms of developing your overall fitness. Mm-hmm. But in terms of a penalty for a race, I think we've seen this, you know, I think the first Unbreakable Challenge was burpees for time, right?
Yes.
And looking across you know, people were obviously filming these, posting these, and they wouldn't have filmed and posted if they thought their technique wasn't good enough, right?
Yes, but this is true.
For me, I was watching a lot of the videos online, and obviously it's great that people are doing these exercises, but there's such a huge variation in terms of what some people would deem a good burpee and others would deem a good burpee. And you go to the UK, for example, and they have, you know, I'd say that's the most stringent I've seen them in terms of making sure the chest is fully on the ground. And I think that not the problem, but where people, maybe there's a grayer areas with the hips extended. So not like leaning over forward like this, but, you know, hips fully extended. And so I was watching some of these people knocking out as many burpees as they can in a minute. And if they were doing that in the UK, you could add a 10-minute penalty onto all of these people's time, because none of them would have hit the mark, where you were looking at other people that were producing much slower times. And, you know, they had really tight form with the burpees. I think if you ever watched like John Albin in a race, his burpees are absolutely on the money. And I've got to say as well, like certainly like with yourself, Jesse, and a lot of the Singapore crew, you know, the burpees, I feel like in this area of the world, I've seen some really strong, correct form burpees, but you know, these guys were doing the burpees on this challenge fresh. You put that into a race situation, you know, with so much fatigue.
When you are fatigued,
the technique's going to be even worse than what these people are showing now. So in terms of consistency, I think it cannot be the penalty that we use in Spartan race, because there's too much variation. Even though it's clear in terms of the different segments that make the correct burpee, it's just not you know, it is standardized, but it's just not consistently, the rule isn't consistent across the board in terms of what people would deem a correct burpee. So
there's still room for interpretation. For sure. And I think what's interesting is that even
that's the
when you look
answer,
at room for interpretation, but
that's basically what I was trying to say.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Like you look at the different world records even for burpees, and there's distinctions even amongst those in terms of, you know, this is a full chest to ground burpee, this is, you know, a full extension of the hips burpee and that sort of thing. So even though we kind of have the Spartan standard, I agree, you know, it's like you go to some places and so long as, you know, your hands are above your ears, that's good. You go to other places and it's like hands clear above your head, arms fully extended. And, you know, that's small, but magnified over 30, over, you know, how many failed obstacles or having run whatever distance, that can be different. So if it wasn't a burpee, what would it be for you?
So it has to be something which is easily measurable, or there can't be any room for interpretation. So the obvious thing that comes to mind is a penalty loop. And whether that's a penalty loop that involves a sandbag carry or a penalty loop that involves a barbed wire crawl, I feel like Toughest have just nailed it in terms of you'll go into that race.
Oh gosh, don't get Jay in here. He'll say exactly the same thing.
The right person will win because you've got a choice of obstacles at different levels of difficulty. If you fail, there are quite clear penalties that don't have any room for interpretation. It's clear what you have to do and how you do it. And so I feel the obvious one is the penalty loop with a weight or sandbag or with some barbed wire crawl. But something that would significantly slow you down and take between maybe a minute and a half to 2 minutes. I feel that would be the kind of time scale that would be fair and sap you enough to make sure that it doesn't become just a running race. It is an obstacle course race. And if you fail the obstacle, the penalty is such that it does have a big impact within your race as well. So that would be the obvious one for me. I think from a race directors and race setup point of view, I feel that's an easy one as well to put in. It's you're just adding on an extra loop. You could almost put like a, you know, in the simplest form, you could almost put like a cone or something and say, look, there you go, round that and back with a marshal there, just making sure you're doing it. It doesn't necessarily need to be hugely taped or anything as well. So that's the obvious one that comes to mind. But yeah, I think the burpee has to go. I think it has affected so many races in terms of like poor form or people not doing enough, or, you know, you watch, you know, with the US series and some of the burpees there have just been like nowhere near close to what I would call acceptable. So it has to change, and hopefully Spartan, I think, have trialed a few things and will move away from it. So let's see.
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely seen a couple of penalty loops or penalty crawls that have started working their way into things. So I'll be interested.
Yeah, Jacksonville, we saw it for the spear.
Yes, exactly. So, which made a huge difference to the times as well. I really enjoyed that. It really changed the dynamic of the race.
It was brilliant. You saw obviously Aaron Newell was having like a great race in that one as well.
Yeah.
Missed the spear, the loop, and then he was out of it. And he was possibly on for like definitely a top 5, maybe even a higher finish than that. That could have been his breakthrough race. But it worked, and I feel, you know, certainly that when I speak to the top dogs at Spartan, the feedback that I always give is I feel this is the big change that they need to make next. And I feel, you know, they obviously want to push OCR, and Spartan are part of this team that are pushing this towards it being, you know, an Olympic event is what obviously they're aiming for, right? That's not going to cut it mustard at the Olympics. Burpees, right? It's like,
it's true.
People, I think, outside the sport. So if you fail the obstacle, what do you do? Burpees. Like, would you see that in any other professional sport, or you're not going to? It's not going to be open to interpretation. So yeah, it's got to move on.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, even like you said, if it just becomes an obstacle, that then, you know, you do an extra obstacle, which I know is one of the things in Toughest Race. I think they have some penalty loops, and then they also have some where you then do like an over under through wall and a crawl as well. Yeah,
if you choose like the easier option.
Yes. Yeah, so you still are doing an obstacle, but an easier obstacle for failing a harder obstacle, which I think is, you know, still a nice way of looking at it, and also feeds into how people are training. So I think sometimes when you look at people doing burpees with bad form, that's because realistically you've got some of the top guys out there who aren't training their burpees because they're not planning to fail lots of obstacles. So especially then when they're doing
horrible,
it under fatigue. Oh god, they're miserable. Like if I could take burpees out of my training completely, I would do.
Yeah, it's like you fail something and the worst thing that you could possibly do is that. So who's really going to, you know, a lot of these guys are going into the mindset, right, 30 of the most perfect burpee, you know, trying to smash through these things as fast as possible. Hence, then there's just a complete difference in terms of, you know, what people think is a good burpee or not. So,
yeah, absolutely. But, well, maybe we'll see for the end of the season, or you know, next year, depending on when we all get back, if there'll be some new changes in the works.
Yeah, we'll see. But no, we'll fingers crossed we are back out there sooner rather than later. And
yes, I hope so. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Ian. Before we wrap, I know that you work with a few different partners. So is there anyone that you'd like to give a shout out to before we close off?
Absolutely, yeah. So obviously, first of all, I should say a big shout out to Spartan being on the pro team. So thanks to Spartan for you know, these incredible races. We sometimes take them for granted, and then at times like this, you know, everyone is so desperate to get out of that race and make on amazing events. They're the best, you know, for me, the best OCR company out there, and do an amazing job. So big up to Spartan, first of all. Obviously, been working with Red Dot this year as well. Amazing running store in Singapore. Love all the products that they have on board there. But 2 products that I'm working with there are Tailwind and Naked Running Band, which I love using as well. And obviously the Stretch Clinic have been helping me out. I've had, you know, I'm probably on a roll of about 20 months where I've had 0 injuries.
Wow.
Working a lot on the prehab side of things now, and as I say, you know, things are going from strength to strength. I'm feeling faster, quicker, building a better aerobic base. and poised, hopefully, when we do get back out there, to, I feel, have my best season yet. So big up to the stretch clinic. Rehab Zone as well have given me a bit of support, and Rock Tape SG as well. So all brands and companies that I would buy or use their services or products anyway, and got great relationships with them. So yeah, thanks to all of those companies for supporting me. Appreciate it, and helping me on my OCR journey. So.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Ian. Really appreciate your time, and hopefully when this all closes off, we can see you out there, with some training sessions and also at some races. Absolutely, as well. And yeah, looking forward to seeing how you and Jessie and the rest of the Singapore girls get on this year. I think we've got an amazing group of athletes out here who are going to just go from strength to strength. We love what we do. I think everyone's really serious about making big improvements, and I love what the Spartan have done with the global product of the protein this year. It's there are some great races in the US, but there's some great races worldwide, and I think we'll see at Abu Dhabi this year as well. A big mix-up in terms of who really are the big OCR guys. I think you're going to see a lot of different names, a lot of different people in that top 10 that's outside the US. Yeah. And I think the Asian representation will be bigger, APAC representation, should I say, will be bigger. Yeah. And I think you'll see some guys from this region doing well out there as well. Yeah, I'm excited. It's going to be good. Yep. Did you lose me for a second? I did lose you. I did lose you for a second, but just for a brief one. Low battery. I'm back. No worries. Well, that was perfect timing in that case. Good luck, Ilona, with all your training and everything, and to Jay as well. And I hope you guys continue to stay positive and continue to see gains during this off period as well. Look forward to seeing you hopefully in either out on the Macritchie or somewhere. Oh gosh, yeah. when we're all out of our houses and out of our neighbourhoods again. Absolutely. No, that time will come, I'm sure.
And that concludes this episode of the OCR Review. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'd love to hear from you, so please hit us up on our social media channels. You can email us at theocrreview@gmail.com, find us on Instagram at theocrreview, or on Facebook at the OCR Review. Remember to send us your thoughts, questions and suggestions for future episodes, and please do subscribe on Spotify, Apple or your podcast platform of choice, and leave us a review. We've been Ilona, Jay, Sean and Jessie, and this is the OCR Review. Thanks for listening.